From a Celtic woman buried in a tree to the Xbox logo found at a Chinese dig site, here are 10 of the world's craziest archaeological discoveries. Number 10. Xbox logo in China. There's no denying the uncanny resemblance between the Xbox logo from the tech giant Microsoft and the tomb unearthed recently in China. It's very obviously a huge X shape that's carved over the tomb, but the truth of the matter is that it wasn't painted with the green Xbox color. The ancient tomb discovered in China from the Qin dynasty did have a giant X across its top, but it's really just a coincidence. Somebody actually used paint to make the photograph look more like the official Xbox logo. They then posted it online, where the image became so popular that the official Xbox Twitter account posted a funny comment saying, "Ah yes, that's the Xbox 220 BC. The real tomb is much more mysterious. Researchers believe it comes from the days of the first emperor of Qin. Qin was the very first dynasty of imperial China. This dynasty lasted between 221 and 206 BC. Right now, one of the biggest questions surrounding this huge tomb is why exactly it's so big, and why does it have a giant X over its top? Number 9. Anglo-Saxon ship burial. One of the most impressive medieval graves ever discovered in Europe happened way back in 1939. This happened when an amateur archaeologist named Basil Brown uncovered something far more astonishing than any normal grave. He found a buried longship, complete with a burial chamber full of spectacular riches. The ship he discovered was almost 90 feet long, and it contained feasting vessels, silverware from Byzantium, luxurious textiles, fancy accessories set with garnets from Sri Lanka, and an iconic helmet with a human mask. And he found it all buried in Suffolk, England. That's definitely not the first place you think of when it comes to medieval graves. According to the curator of early medieval European collections, the burial site was probably the grave of a very important person. It would have been somebody from the Anglo-Saxon period, way before England as we know it today ever existed. But even though this archaeological discovery happened in 1939, we still don't know who exactly the impressive grave was built for. It was likely for a king, but which exact king is a total mystery. One of the most popular candidates is Redwald, a man who ruled the kingdom of East Anglia around the 7th century. Because he was known to have exuded power over the neighboring kingdoms, he was probably given a very dazzling funeral. But unfortunately, when the graveyard in a boat was unearthed in 1939, there was nobody. To this date, nobody knows for sure whether the body decayed beyond recognition beneath the soil, or if there was ever a body there at all. Number 8. Lost Japanese village. Let's move beyond Europe to the shores of Canada, where in 2004, a retired forester investigated what he first thought was the remains of an old logging camp in the wilds of British Columbia. For the next 14 years, this retired forester took a group of students every year to this remote settlement, which we now know for sure was a secret Japanese encampment located 12 miles northeast of Vancouver. The site is about the size of a football field, and it contains the remains of at least a dozen cabins, one bathhouse, and a road made of cedar planks. They even uncovered a small shrine that the Japanese likely used in rituals. The story behind the settlement is actually pretty disturbing. A Japanese businessman secured logging rights in the area back in 1918. That means the Japanese settlers who lived here were probably loggers. They cleared the trees by 1924, but some of the residents of the camp, likely between 40 and 50 people, chose to remain there because of the horrifying racism in Canadian society during those days. Little known to many people, the Canadian government actually started moving Japanese immigrants into the internment camps when World War II broke out in 1942. The retired forester who has been investigating the secluded Japanese camp is positive that the government must have come in and stolen all the inhabitants to bring them to an internment camp. That means they lived here in solitude for 20 years before being wrangled by the government. This is based on the fact that all of the precious and personal items had been left behind. The forester and his team have already recovered things like an Eastman Kodak camera, a house key, and all kinds of other expensive objects. Number 7. Infant skeletons with helmets. In Ecuador, archaeologists have uncovered the startling remains of at least 11 people distributed between 2 burial mounds. Each mound contained at least one infant, buried wearing an absolutely grotesque helmet crafted from the skull of another child. In a new study, researchers are offering a possible explanation for this horrendous type of burial, which itself is unprecedented in the entire world of archaeology. From what we've seen, the infants and the older children weren't sacrificed, but they probably died from either starvation or disease following a volcanic eruption. Keep in mind that this was 2,000 years ago on the continent of South America, and things were a bit wilder back then. The burial mounds were constructed by people known as Guangala, who lived in Ecuador long before the Spanish ever showed up. Still, this is a very rare discovery simply for the fact that the infants were wearing helmets built from human skulls. According to an anthropologist who worked on the study, the infants were between 6 and 9 months old, and the skulls that they were wearing as helmets were from children between 2 and 12 years old. These skull helmets were so snug on the infants' heads that archaeologists believe the older children's skulls were probably still fleshy and soft when they were converted into helmets. However, researchers have no idea what the relationship was between the infants and the older children whose heads they wore in death. Number 6. Sorceress's Kit in Pompeii. The ancient Roman city of Pompeii is an archaeologist's dream. They found all kinds of amazing things in this preserved city, which was decimated in the year 79 AD after Mount Vesuvius erupted. Thanks to the hot ash that spewed out of the volcano, the entire city has been trapped in a literal time capsule from 2,000 years in the past. Out of all the cool things they've uncovered, in 2019, a new excavation found 100 small objects that they believe were part of a sorceress's toolkit. This kit would have been used for bringing good luck and for telling fortunes. In a press release from the Archaeological Park of Pompeii, they gave out details saying that among the objects, researchers found bone buttons, carved scarab beetles, crystals, small skulls, and even miniature penises. Restorationists have since cleaned the objects, and historians and archaeologists have examined them to try and understand their meaning and their significance. They think that because there were no gold pieces found in the trove of objects, whoever had tried to flee the city with their cache of charms was probably a servant or a slave. The objects would have been used by the sorceress in ceremonies for the wealthier members of society when it came to things like fertility, omens, and seduction. Number 5. Untouched Maya artifacts. Chichen Itza has been studied by experts for years. It's one of the most impressive Maya ruins in Mexico, and even includes the impressive Pyramid El Castillo. But new discoveries are happening all the time. Researchers have now found a cave located almost 2 miles east of the famous pyramid that was first found by locals over half a century ago. Since the first time the locals found it, there have been no professional archaeologists digging there. But in 2019, a team finally got to enter it, and they found a bunch of very cool stuff. Of course, they had to do a 6-hour purification ritual before they could enter the cave system. Then, once inside, researchers had to crawl on their bellies to reach the 7 chambers where the Maya had gone thousands of years ago to leave their offerings, most of which were left for the Mexican god of rain, Tlaloc. So far, researchers have found 155 ceramic incense burners, some clay boxes, and other cool stuff. According to National Geographic, the people working to uncover the secrets of this cave are investigators with the Great Maya Aquifire Project. This is the project aimed at mapping the entirety of the underground cave network hidden beneath the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Even though most of the old Maya world has been explored, there are still many cave systems and underground tunnels that have yet to be seen by modern human eyes. Number 4. Medieval masterpiece in French kitchen. The last place you expect to find an archaeological discovery is in your kitchen. However, a lost masterpiece from the 13th century recently sold for just about $26 million. And this happened just a few months after it was found hanging in a kitchen in France. So far as the story goes, an elderly French woman had kept the rare artwork in her kitchen on the assumption that it was a Greek religious icon. She had absolutely no idea where the small painting had come from, but it turned out to be an incredible work of art by the famous Italian painter, Cimabue. The artist was born as Cenni di Beppo in Florence back around 1240, and he's widely regarded as one of the best artists from the pre-Renaissance era. In fact, there are only 11 of his paintings in the world, and the fact that one of them was simply sitting in a French woman's kitchen is absolutely ludicrous. It had been hanging above a hot plate that the French woman used for her cooking, and now it's the first ever painting by Cimabue to be auctioned. Imagine having to cook over a hot plate for most of your adult life, and then selling the picture hanging over it for more than $20 million overnight. Number 3. Celtic woman in a tree. In Switzerland, an ancient corpse has been found buried inside a hollowed-out tree. This is one of the weirdest finds ever. It's believed that the woman was of Celtic origin and commanded serious respect within her tribe. She died over 2,000 years ago and was buried in some of the finest clothing and jewelry of the times. Scientists say that the Iron Age Celts would often bury members of their tribes inside of tree coffins deep beneath the ground. According to Live Science, this particular woman was found inside her tree coffin in the city of Zurich. She died in 200 BC at the ripe age of 40. An analysis of her bones suggests that she did very little work during her life, meaning she was probably quite important. Further analysis revealed that the woman was wearing a dress made of very fine sheep's wool, along with another woolen cloth and a coat made of sheepskin. She was also wearing quite a bit of jewelry, including bronze bracelets, a bronze belt, and a necklace strung with valuable amber and glass beads. Even more interesting is that a Celtic man was buried roughly 260 feet from her grave, and researchers believe that they may have known each other. The man was buried with his sword, shield, and lance. The woman and the man were buried around the same time. If you're interested in a bit more information on who the Celts were, they were typically British, but they actually stretched as far as modern Turkey. They were such fierce fighters that the Romans built Hadrian's Wall to protect themselves from the dangerous Celts. Number 2. Skeletons under the Tower of London. The Tower of London is one of the biggest tourist attractions in the city of London. It was also the scene of some seriously horrifying events throughout history. Scientists have recently discovered another piece of dramatic history of this famous tower. They unearthed a pair of skeletons at least 500 years old. One skeleton belonged to a woman and the other to a child. They were found underneath the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula, which is known as being a place where the most famous prisoners of the Tower of London have been buried, including 3 different queens of England, all who were executed in the 16th century and had their headless bodies buried beneath the chapel. Oh yes, England was a pretty nasty place 500 years ago. These new individuals who were found were some of the first to be discovered still with their heads attached. They were found within the first 2 days of a dig to try and make the famous chapel more accessible to public viewers. Neither had suffered a violent death, and according to a special report from CNN, the experts believe that the pair had likely lived and worked inside the tower and died of some kind of sickness. Number 1. Roman chicken egg. The next discovery isn't revolutionary, but it's definitely unique. Researchers have now found the only complete chicken egg from Roman Britain. It is one of only 4 eggs discovered in the middle of a dig in Buckinghamshire. 3 of the eggs broke and released a potent stench, but one of the eggs has remained unbroken. It's absolutely fascinating. The egg has been sitting inside of a pit for almost 2,000 years, along with a small hoard of other organic relics. An archaeologist working with the dig team has claimed that the pit being excavated was like a wishing well for people in the 3rd century, who threw a whole bunch of random stuff inside of it, including this special egg. They would have done this for good luck, and because the pit remained waterlogged for over 1,000 years, most of the objects inside of it remained very well preserved. The eggs were found with a breadbasket, and researchers figure it was likely some kind of food offering thrown into the pit as part of a ceremony during the funeral procession of somebody unknown. The dig went on from between 2007 and 2016 as preparation for the development of some housing and community facilities near the ancient Roman Britain town of Fleet Marston. Which of these discoveries is the most shocking? Let me know how you feel in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. If you haven't already, be sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. See you again soon for another fun video right here on American Eye.